I'm very pleased to welcome you here today. We have two wonderful readers, and I'm excited to have Bob Hicok here. I've been hearing Bob Hicok's name from my students and at Binghamton and for several years, and so it's exciting for me to actually get to hear his work. I've read his work, but to actually get to hear him read that work is going to be really exciting for me. Bob Hicok's fifth book of poetry, This Clumsy Living, was published in 2007 by Pitt, University of Pittsburgh Press. Animal Soul, published in 2001, was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. He is a recipient of an NEA fellowship, and his poems have appeared in 3 volumes of Best American Poetry. That's quite amazing. And he's twice received the Pushcart Prize. He was recently awarded the Jerome J. Shestak Prize by the American Poetry Review and the Anne Haley Prize from the Massachusetts Review. He teaches at Virginia Tech, and I think his poetry is amazing, unique, individual, and very alive. Let's welcome Bob Hicok.
This will take some getting used to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rosemary Johnson. Let's welcome Rosemary. Who's our wonderful signer who does such a good job and makes absolutely no trouble and just comes in and translates everything. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm going to make your hands swear. I apologize
No problem.
in advance.
John, should he lift that up more? He's a lot taller.
Yeah, it is what it is in terms of the extension.
It'll be fun. It'll be fine, I think.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Let's take a survey. Thank you, Maria, for inviting me here to read. This first poem is called Oh My Papa. Our fathers have formed a poetry workshop. They sit in a circle of disappointment over our fastballs and wives. We thought they didn't read our stuff. Whole anthologies of poems that begin, My father never, or those that end, and he was silent as a carp, or those with middles which, if you think of the right side as a sketch, look like a paunch of beer and worry. But secretly, with flashlights in the woods, they've read every word and noticed that our 9 happy poems have balloons and sex and giraffes inside, but not one dad waving hello from the top of a hill at dusk. Theirs is the revenge school of poetry, with titles like My Yellow Sheet Lad and Given Your Mother's Taste for Vodka, I'm pretty sure you're not mine. They're not trying to make the poems better so much as sharper or louder, more like a fishhook or electrocution. As a group, they overcome their individual senilities, their complete distaste for language, how cloying it is, how like tears it can be, and remember every mention of their long hours at the office or how tired they were when they came home, when they were dragged through the door by their shadows. I don't know why it's so hard to write a simple and kind poem to my father, who worked not like a dog. Dogs sleep most of the day in a ball of wanting to chase something, but like a man with 7 kids and a house to feed, whose absence was his presence, his present, the Cheerios, the PF Flyers, who taught me things about trees, that they're the most intricate version of standing up, who built a grandfather clock with me so I would know that time is a constructed thing, a passing, ticking fancy, a bomb that'll go off soon for him, for me. And I notice in our father's poems a reciprocal dwelling on absence, that they wonder why we disappeared as soon as we got our licenses, why we wanted the rocket cars, as if running away from them to kiss girls who looked like mirrors of our mothers wasn't fast enough. And it turns out they did start to say something, to form the words hey or stay, but we'd turned into a door full of sun, into the burning leave, and were gone before it came to them that it was all right to shout, that they should have knocked us down with a hand on our shoulders, that they too are mystified by the distance men need in their love. It sounds better to me coming out of your hands. I was born in Michigan, and this poem is called I Was Born on the Lifeline. I remember Michigan fondly as the place I go to be in Michigan. The right hand of America waving from maps, or the left pressing into clay a mold to take home from kindergarten to mother. I lived in Michigan 43 years. The state bird is a chained factory gate. The state flower is Lake Superior, which sounds egotistical, though it is merely cold and deep as truth. A Midwesterner can use the word truth, can sincerely use the word sincere. In truth, the Midwest is not mid or west. When I go back to Michigan, I drive through Ohio. There is off I-75 in Ohio a mosque, so life goes corn, 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 mosque. I wave at Islam, which we're not getting along with on account of the towers as I pass. Then Ohio goes corn, 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 billboard. Goodbye, Islam. You never forget how to be from Michigan when you're from Michigan. It's like riding a bike of ice and fly fishing. The Upper Peninsula is a spare state in case Michigan goes flat. I live now in Virginia, which has no backup plan, but is named the same as my mother. I live in my mother again, which is creepy. But so is what the skin under my chin is doing. Suddenly, there's a pouch like marsupials are needed. The state joy is spring. Osiris, we beseech thee, rise and give us baseball, is how we might sound were we Egyptian in April, when February hasn't ended. February is 13 months long in Michigan. We are a people who by February want to kill the sky for being so gray and angry at us. What did we do is the state expression. There's a day in May when we're all tumblers. Gymnastics is everywhere and daffodils are asked by young men to be their wives. When a man elopes with a daffodil, you know where he's from. In this way, I have given you a primer. Let us all be from somewhere. Let us tell each other everything we can. I want to read this next poem for Joe.
He's there.
Joe, who was a toolmaker. I used to design automotive dies, and I also for a while worked in a prototype shop, which is we would make temporary dies to stamp out car parts so they could put cars together, so they could smash them, and analyze how that went for the cars, which was usually not very well. This poem is called Modern Prototype. We melt the old thing into the new thing. Tongs, a ladle the size of a man's head, I fill with thoughts of molten steel. Fire below the cauldron in our cigarettes, and the right hand of the man coming back from the bathroom with his skin mag. He'd tell me, were I to ask, which stapled woman ignites him. The night goes on without us. On break, I read Asimov in my getaway. A bus, day shifts building that pivots in the center to make cornering easier. I close my eyes and think of myself as joined pieces. I'm 19 and the money's good, and I still want to be everything. First night, by way of hello, a guy told me he fucked his wife on gravel. She on her knees and he pulling her head back to devour her grimace. As if I asked about sex and pain, 900 degrees, and how did I get here? What we create in the foundry returns to be erased. This bumper shape must now become a door shape. I'm being taught what a borrowed force I am, parts lion, pimp. With the overhead crane, I float tons of cooling metal away. It takes a thumb on a red button to be God. We're out of beer, the foreman tells me, sending me out under stars to fix our blood. I'm 19, I'm 46, still trying to sing the song of making. How on the edge of the unlit lot, the demented pit bull growls with teeth that it sees me, and I growl with pipe that I see it back, and we join in attacking the indifference. Despite what this next poem sounds like, I really have nothing against therapists. This poem is called Self-Help. I go to the basement of St. Stephen's once a month, gather folding chairs into a circle and say, "My name is Bob, and I'm a narcissist." The meetings kill me because I'm alone and have to smoke all the cigarettes and drink all the coffee one expects when repenting. There's a mirror I stare at while saying, "Go on." And when I break down, I put my head in my lap or ask me if I'd like to kneel with me and pray. I never do because I know some people want to feel superior, and I think I'm one of those people, and I won't give me that kind of advantage over me. Now and then I save a child from drowning or listen to my wife, not to the openings between the words, but the actual words, so I have something selfless to admit. Through my help, I'm getting a little better every day, which I take one day at a time. I've noticed calendars do the same thing. I like their attitude. Monday, Tuesday, very methodical. Likewise, diaries, so sequential. Page after page, listening to me say, I could have been just a little more me today. How they accept my cursive, that pretty swirl I add to the I, like therein lies tumbling. That joy only I can feel after sleep, when slipping out of dream into my body. Who do I find waiting for me but me? You just applauded narcissism. My God, people, what have we come to?
Dick Cheney.
You know, that just made the whole reading for me.
There you go.
I am done. I teach at Virginia Tech, and the fella who we now refer to as the shooter was a student of mine. This poem is about him, about that situation. It's called So I Know. He put moisturizer on the morning he shot 33 people. That stands out, the desire to be soft. I could tell the guy from NPR, that's what I want, to be soft, or the guy from the LA Times, or the guy from CNN who says, we should chat. Such a casual word, chat. I'm chatting to myself now. You did not do enough, I write to myself. About the kid who turned in writing about killing a few buildings from where he killed. With soft hands in Norris Hall, killed. This is my confession. And legs, I think the roommate said, moisturizer in the shower. I don't know what I could have done, something. Something more than talk to someone who talked to someone. A food chain of language leading to this language of no words we have now. Maybe we exist as language, and when someone dies, they are unworded. Maybe I should have shot the kid and then myself given the math. 2 is less than 33. I was good at math. Numbers are polite, carefree if you ask the random number generators. Mom, I don't mean the killing above. It's something I write like I put my arms around the moon. Maybe sorry is the only sound to offer pointlessly and at random to each other forever. Not because of what it means, but because it means we're trying to mean. I am trying to mean more than I did when I started writing this poem. Too soon, people will say, so what? This is what I do. If I don't do this, I have no face. And if I do this, I have an apple for a face, or something vital almost going forward is the direction I am headed. Come with me from being over here to being over there, from this second to that second. What countries they are, the seconds. What rooms of people being alive in them and then dead in them. The clocks of flowers rise. It's April and yellow, and these seconds are an autopsy of this word. Suddenly. This poem comes from an email I got from someone who teaches creative writing. A student of his had killed himself. God, I'm depressing. This is called In Michael Robbins' Class -1. At the desk where the boy sat, he sees the Chicago River. It raises its hand. It asks if metaphor should burn. He says fire is the basis for all forms of the mouth. He asks, why did you fill the boy with your going? I didn't know a boy had been added to me, the river says. Would you have given him back if you knew? I think so, the river says. I have so many boys in me. I'm worn out, stroking eyes, looking up at the day. Have you written a poem for us? He asks the river, and the river reads its poem, and the other students tell the river it sounds like a poem the boy would have written, that they smell the boy's cigarettes in the poem. They feel his teeth biting the page. And the river asks, did this boy dream of horses? Because I suddenly dream of horses. I suddenly dream. They're in a circle, and the river says, I've never understood round things. Why would leaving come back to itself? And a girl makes a kiss with her mouth and leans it against the river. And the kiss flows away, but the river wants it back. The river makes sounds to go after the kiss. And they all make sounds for the river to carry to the boy. And the river promises to never surrender the boy's shape to the ocean. I'm going to end with a poem about Kenneth Koch. For years, I really didn't care for his poetry. And I don't know why, recently turned around in that feeling. And that's one of the most enjoyable things for me, is when work that had either just bored me or for whatever reason didn't compel me opens up. And it also touches on a problem that I've had, not a major problem, but a problem with my last name. My name is Hicok, and sometimes people choose the least likely pronunciation of that name. And the poem is called, "Why Would Your First Guess Be Cock?" Almost every poem by Kenneth Koch includes the word poem or poetry. Often, poetry is the subject of his poem. Sometimes, poetry is just a hair on his poem. He's like a kid who discovers he's a kid every time he opens his eyes and rabbits are looking back and hopping. Big rabbits who know because of his gentle gaze that they're not ever going to be in a stew, as was the case with some of their grandparents. I feel free when reading his No Rabbit Stew poems to not read them, or read bits of them, or start one and think, this is boring. Because on the next page there will be one about which I think, this is like being a speedboat painter while the speedboat's on the lake and tearing my hair out. Many people think poems shouldn't be about poems, and many people think poems can't help but be all about poems, and I'm sure I could fit both sets of many people in my pants. When you do a thing for a very long time, like listing to the left or drawing a mustache on your face in the morning with blue sky, it's hard not to talk of the listing or mustache drawing you've been doing for a very long time with other listers or facial hair artists. And for someone made of ink, as was Kenneth Pepsi, to not talk of poetry in your poetry would be to not walk of walking as you walk, or not fuck of fucking while you fuck, which Kenneth Koch wanted to do much of in the poems that talked about poetry, and the poems that had no overt hosannas to toss in that direction. I like poems about poetry, and poems about nothing, and poems about how poetry is about nothing, and poems about face, and poems that have box tops, and poems about the glow-in-the-dark poem that will be mine 3 weeks after I mail in the box tops, and poems secretly about how to pronounce Kenneth Koch's name, and poems with bears in them lately, and poems learning Spanish, and poems that answer the question, did people who spoke Latin use Pig Latin? And poems that wonder, why did you ask such a stupid question? And poems that explain why 73% of poems have questions. And poems that answer some of those questions with frisbees. And poems that drag on too long, and their addiction to anaphora. And poems that criticize themselves as they go. And poems that have 3 Z's in them, and poems that shrug off the self like it's a cape, and poems that dwell on the self like it's a hemorrhoid, for which poetry's the miracle cream of relief, and poems that are happy, not embarrassed about the cream, and poems that never, and poems that suddenly. Thank you for listening.
Bloody